Мы 18 секунд сейчас подойдем. Так. Ага, все, в порядке. Спасибо большое. So to all of us that joined this webinar just a bit earlier, we will wait for 4 more minutes so that everyone who was signed can get connected and get to this webinar. So it would be around 3 to 4 minutes more. And we have a question, no audio yet. There is audio. You should hear me now. I hope so. Can you hear me now? Yeah, there should be. There should, because I'm watching that thing. There must be audio going. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. Before we start, and I will say that once more once we go fully live, if you could use Slido, we have the text in the description. That would be the tool in which you can do polls and you can ask questions. So if you go into the description of this webinar, there is a link to Slido, and there's a code 1355 and 2, and which is where we will collect the poll information, and we'll collect the questions for later. And we have a couple more minutes. We already have one poll live in there, so you can test if Slido is working for you by voting where are you from. So we will wait for 1 more minute, and then we'll proceed with webinar. Okay, we will wait for, I guess, a couple more minutes for those that have received notification that there is webinar that is fully live, and then we will start the main part. So if some of you are still haven't connected and are just planning to get on with it, we will wait for 1 minute for you. Okay, I guess it's time to start. Welcome to the webinar on fraud in telecommunications. We will be covering several instances of voice fraud today. We will talk about different scenarios. We will talk about how these scenarios affect different parties. We will talk more about what the tool against those scenarios should look like, what are the features that you might be looking for, and what are the general best practices to use against different fraud scenarios. So, my name is Igor Skutsinya. I work for LANCK Telecom. We are a major international voice carrier. We also have our own in-house fraud management system, which we'll demonstrate during this webinar. We have a vast experience working with voice traffic internationally, and we have a vast experience in tackling fraud that could be coming from other destinations. So, we will talk about different kinds of fraud. Unfortunately, we don't have time to cover them all. Even the voice fraud has many kinds and scenarios through which fraudsters might take advantage. But we will cover several of them, and we will have the fraud scenarios that are affecting operators and the fraud scenarios that are affecting enterprises, the companies that are using international voice services. As I saw, the participants are very diverse. We will have some people from government entities around the world. We will have aspiring students that just would like to know more about what voice fraud is, what is and how to tackle it. We have several banks in attendance, as I understand, that were registered for that. And obviously, we have people from telecom world. We have the representatives from operators, and we have representatives from international carriers. So the participants are very diverse. And obviously, everyone is very interested because of, telecom fraud would affect anyone, regardless of your region or your company that you work with. It's the thing that could affect our businesses in a very serious way. So the topic is hot, and to satisfy all the parties, we will be comprehensive. We will list things that are unknown to enterprises. We would talk about things that may be unknown to the operators and carriers that are in attendance. So what we can guarantee is that everyone would learn something, and everyone would take something new from this webinar. Before we go any further, we advise testing the Slido. It's the tool that we will be using for the polls and for questions. We will have a couple of stops in this webinar to answer questions and to just let us know if the tool is working for you. We have a poll opened up about the region you're from. So just to make sure that the tool is working for you, just if you could get the country you're from in there so that we know that it's working out for you. So Slido, the link is in the description, and the code is 1355 and 2. It's 13552. See the description below the video. And while we haven't started the main part yet, you still have just a couple of seconds to have that vote for the country that you're from. And perhaps if you already have some questions, you can go right ahead and just put them there, so that when we will have the questions section, we will be answering them. And obviously, if you see the question that reflects your interest, that you just voted up, so the most popular questions would be up there, would be visible, and that would let us know that this is the question that is pressing, and this is the one that we should give priority to. Okay, let's get started. So this is our first slide. We will talk briefly about what is telecom fraud and what are the typical scenarios that are listed in there. So the telecom fraud is an exploitation of the service, of telecom service, without intention to pay, or it's the opposite. It's the revenue that is being tried to, that is taken away from you for the service that wasn't provided to you at all, or the service that wasn't provided with your consent, or was provided illegally. This is anything that has trouble spelled out over it. And the selected fraud scenarios would be the scenarios that are targeting operators and they're targeting enterprises. So if we are talking about the operators right here, I don't know if you see my mouse. So target operators. We list robocalls. It's the unwanted and marketing sales calls, sometimes with local and familiar number, that are being delivered to some operators' network in massive amounts, with hundreds of thousands of these calls made daily. It's a major problem. It's a problem that affects the brand. It greatly affects the quality of service. It affects, obviously, the retail clients of the operator, and it's a major problem. Even though it's not the largest kind of fraud, even on our list, still it has gathered a lot of attention from operators and from government and from law enforcement. In North America, there is special legislation being passed recently to target this kind of fraud. Regarding the actual volume of this kind of fraud, it's estimated at $1 billion a year. But if you combine this with CLI spoofing, and CLI spoofing is a case when this robocall is being delivered with a familiar or local number. I mean, the call center that is sadly delivering those things could be elsewhere, but you might have a call with you might have a robocall that has the number from your phone book, or just being local to you, like with your local region code. With that tweak, this whole scenario could reach up to $3 billion per year. So the volume worldwide is huge, and it's a very large problem for the operators. Another case of operator-targeted fraud would be one-geary. I know that a lot of people, just the retail end users, are being affected by one-geary. It's a very common case, sadly. And this is when you have a very short call attempt that generates a missed call icon on your phone, and that prompts the user to call back. And it turns out that this number that he or she is calling back is either the premium rate service number, it's the number that is very costly per minute, or it could be a hijacked international route. So either way, these unfortunate things bring $1.8 billion US every year into pockets of fraudsters, sadly. And it's a very sad thing, even though it's been around for a while now, but still it's very prevalent, and we know about some cases that would have over 1 million of one-geary call attempts being delivered to just one operator. I mean, the common size would be like tens of thousands of calls or hundreds of thousands of calls per operator, but still some outstanding cases on some very large operators, they have over 1 million attempts. So it's a very large problem, obviously. If we're going to enterprises and how does the fraudster target businesses, the most obvious one would be PBX hacking, as you can see here. This is when fraudsters gain access to PBX and use it for expensive international traffic. They might use it for natural traffic, like the actual calls by the actual people. It's sadly possible technically. Or they might use it to route generated traffic. And it's a very large problem because the businesses that are being targeted, they might suffer a lot of losses, just large losses with sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour with particularly damaging attacks. And what we generally suggest is make sure that it doesn't happen, maintain good password hygiene, make sure that you have a very limited amount of people that is accessing your PBX, and just keep your security perimeter up. And also, if that's possible for you, just learn, get yourself educated, and choose a solution provider or a mobile operator for PBX, that has a good anti-fraud solution that would protect you from PBX hacking. And annual losses are estimated at 3.6 billion US dollars. This is one of the largest, one of the most damaging fraud scenarios, sadly. And the second scenario that is damaging the enterprises would be 1GIRI 2.0. This is a fraud scenario that we discovered at LANCK Telecom. We were just going through that process of looking for any fraud scenarios that might be new, that might be unknown, and we encountered this one. So 1GIRI 2.0 is a bit like original 1GIRI, but it has slightly different mechanics and it has a different target of fraud. If original 1GIRI is basically targeting operators and retail customers, then 1GIRI 2.0 is affecting the businesses, the enterprises, the ones that are using, international voice services to promote their business, to communicate with customers worldwide, to promote their image, to gather feedback about their products and services, and so on. So the affected clients, the one category of affected clients would be those that have online call me back forms. If you're a bank, if you are a very large international e-commerce store, if you have a lot of international retail clients, then you would sometimes have that form on your website where people put their data in there and ask, call me back, I'd like to be using your service, I would like to know more, I have this trouble, could you please contact me and let me know what to do in this situation. But we will talk about mechanics later. And this, in details, I mean. And the second category would be mobile applications. Mobile applications that use voice messages to deliver one-time passwords. When you have a large mobile application that is having like millions of users worldwide, you would like to maintain some account security. And one of the ways to do that is to deliver one-time password to a tied phone number of this particular customer. You provide one-time password by SMS or voice message. So in case that your company or your partner company is using this service to deliver one-time password by voice message, you might be affected by that. So we have the categories right. Okay, the scenario would be as follows. The bots are being used to fill those forms online, either for a bank that would be a callback form, or they would be using the actual accounts to request those, the delivery of voice messages, deliver one-time passwords. But what they would use is they would use the PRS numbers or very expensive international routes. So what would happen is that instead of putting their personal phone number through which you can contact them, they would be using fraudulent numbers that would cost a lot of money to be just being there, and that would be the way they would get into your security system. So for call centers, for example, if we're talking about the banks, and we had an opportunity to kind of test the ground with it, and we saw that this scenario is sadly very open. So the scenario would be when you fill the online form on some foreign bank. If, for example, you're in Europe, you fill it up for American bank and vice versa, and you can make your mind as to what regions are you from and what to do with it. But you would put this expensive number, and then you would either have an extensive IVR, interactive voice response, well, it's basically a voice message, to keep the operator online. So when they call you back, when they react to that, they would stay on the line for as long as possible. Or if you have the network of 1GIRI 2.0, then you can have a con man for that particular fraud, which would have a scenario, a list of questions, a list of concerns, so that, with going back and forth with the operator of call center, they would make sure that the conversation is going and the call duration is going, so there's more and more fraud generated. With mobile apps, it's a bit different. With mobile apps, you just use automatic measures to generate the delivery of hundreds and thousands of those one-time passwords. Just, and there would be multiple requests on these operations, and they would be never used, because you would just have those voice message delivered, you have some call duration, and this is basically what the enterprises would be paying for. The annual losses for 1GIRI 2.0 from these call center losses and the mobile applications losses, they are unknown right now. There is no clear data for that, but what we can do is we sometimes see more 1GIRI 2.0 attacks on certain destinations than on original 1GIRI. And if we look back on 1GIRI being $1.8 billion a year problem, we can estimate that to be, well, maybe less, because the fraudsters aren't yet there with that scheme. But still, we might fear that in the future it would become even a larger problem than original 1GIRI. So, what we'd like to let you know is that fraud is a major problem, and we will talk more about what to do with it later on, what solutions should you maintain, what kind of practices you should maintain, what to look for in the fraud management system, and obviously we would be answering some questions. So, if we could test again our Slido, there is probably should be a second poll, and it would be around the industry that you represent. Those would be the mobile companies, the mobile operators, the enterprises, maybe some other categories, the government officials. So just let us know where you're from and what kind of company do you represent. You could be a solution provider even. I mean, we're always out there to share good best practices so that we do our business environment safer for everyone. And I didn't say that right away, but there's an 18-second lag from what I'm saying here going your way to the actual YouTube translation. So we might have like about 20 seconds lag before I see the results, and the questions and the things that I say would be reaching you. Okay. So do we have votes? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we have some votes. At least the tool is working. Okay. You can proceed with voting and doing the polls later on throughout, and we will move on to the next section. The next section would be fraud management systems. We would be just saying what fraud management system is, and we will describe features of a good fraud management system in some details. So fraud management system is essentially a solution. It's essentially a platform that would let you tackle the fraudsters that might be trying to take some money away from you. That platform could be used by the solution, by the PBX provider that you're using. It could be your own if you're a mobile operator. It could be installed at the operator, and thus this operator would be protecting all his or her clients, and this is how the fraud management system would work. The obvious intent of having a fraud management system is not to be in those billions of losses from the last slide. And if you can stay away from that and make sure that fraudsters would look elsewhere for their victim, then your work here is done, and that means that fraud management system is doing its work. And your solution provider, if they have the fraud management system, then they're doing a good job protecting you from the risks. Okay, the features of a good fraud management system would be, first of all, real-time analysis and action. Let me get into some details as for how the fraud management would be working so that you would understand what's so good about real-time analysis and action. Real-time allows you to react really, really fast. As soon as you discover the fraud, then it's automatically blocked or just being dealt with right away. Some solutions from previous generations, some legacy solutions, they would have this problem of just being dependent on the CDR uploads. CDR is essentially a call record. Call detailed record is the actual acronym for that. And those CDRs would be uploaded every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, or every 30 minutes. And then they would be analyzed, and then there would be a decision to take into action, to take some action, and then there would be action. So obviously there is some lag between the actual fraud start and the actual measures against it. But if you have a real-time analysis and action, and to say the longer fraud is going on, the more money you lose, because they all depend on the duration of those fraudulent calls. The longer these calls go on, the more money you lose. So the less time would be needed to discover those cases and to take care of them, the less would be your expenses on fraud. So the next one would be machine learning, and just to say we employ a fraud management system that has real-time analysis and action. Okay, the second part would be machine learning, the point number 2. Fraudsters don't sit idle, and neither should we. Fraudsters get better, they employ better tech, they employ better scenarios, they just generally get better at what they do. And what we see and what's been reported numerous times is that you have a lot more cases with lower volume. So the volume of one fraud attack, that the damage that is being sustained by one attack is getting lower, but you have a lot more attacks worldwide, sadly. And that's because they can employ just next generation equipment. So that means that we shouldn't be idle as well. It's essentially a cat and mouse game. And it's never enough to just be ahead at one given point of time. You should stay better than fraudsters to be properly protected, because you know they get better, sadly. So machine learning, what it does is that it analyzes different traffic parameters, and it learns what is normal for voice traffic on a particular destination, on a particular enterprise client, on a particular operator, and it learns the patterns of the normal traffic that is typical for that. And obviously it learns what fraud looks like in each partner's traffic. So by learning and employing this knowledge and these techniques into different regions and different partners, we're making sure that the fraud scenario and fraud technique that's being applied elsewhere one day, that wouldn't be a threat tomorrow, because machine learning is being used to learn that pattern, to learn the typical parameters of the fraud scenario, so that the fraudsters will not have any gain when they use the same thing. This tool can spot even well-disguised attacks, and it's a thing of beauty. This is one of the things that we're most proud of. We put a lot of work in having machine learning at the level that we have today. We have several PhDs in statistics and analysis and analytics working to make our machine learning better, and we're especially proud of that feature. The third one would be customization to fit particular vision and needs. And this is more of a concern for operators because they know their traffic just in the way we would probably have a hard time ever learning. So we must have a tool, a good fraud management system must allow the operators and the clients to reflect their vision as for what do they expect from different partners around the world, from different kinds of enterprise that would be using their voice services, and to just use their knowledge, use their experience from prior to make the system and reaction more precise, more granular, just better in general. And the last feature that we would like to talk about would be the feature of easy integration of fraud management system. I mean, we all live in the world that we live in. Times are particularly tough for any kind of businesses. All the businesses around the world are being affected. And this is the time of tight budgets. This is the time when you cannot deploy large resources for a new project. You are very tight on specialist hours, and no one wants to spend big and take on large projects. So the system must be easy to integrate. It must be easy to use. It must be quick to get access to. It's essentially should be plug and play. It's not the project that should take months in preparation and millions of dollars in fulfillment. This is something that should be easy to accept. So our position at it shouldn't be a challenge. Getting a fraud management system after you sadly sustain some losses or just in advance, just to be sure, it shouldn't be a challenge on organizational level. It shouldn't be a large project. It should be easy. Okay, let's go to Slido if we have some questions over there. Okay. Okay, we have what region of the world suffers most from the fraud? You got to understand that there are two sides of the fraud. There is a region that is being affected, and there is a region which routes would be used for the international traffic. Like if someone sadly hacks your PBX, then they're calling somewhere to, for example, to Cuba or to several Eastern European destinations, and those would be, oh, okay, thank you. Those would be the ones that would be used. And as for the region that suffers the most, that would be slightly different. It would depend on the nature of the operator. It would more depend on the actual technical environment of the particular market. Like if you have a very large, very wealthy operator that is being affected by the fraud, then you can generate, sadly, a lot of money off them. And on the other hand, you might have a mobile operator that is not too advanced in terms of fraud protection. So even though they are small, they might sustain a lot of damages just because their protection would sadly be up to date. So it's a case by case. You cannot say right away like what region is the most effective. As for the region generating that thing, it depends on the international rates. So when you're looking at a region that has higher international voice rates to be calling to that destination, chances are that that region would sadly be used for fraud. Again, this is the preliminary judgment. I mean, there are multiple fraud scenarios. There are multiple fraudsters that would employ different things, but this is a guideline that we can provide. Okay, our aggregators and VAS providers provide a weak link to the MNOs for these frauds. It's a tough question. It depends on the fraud scenario. It depends on a particular VAS provider and aggregator. It depends on the regions that they work with, the enterprise that they work with, and most importantly on the fraud management system that they employ. Oftentimes, end users, like for example with OneGiri 2.0, the weak link would be the enterprises because they're being affected directly. They are the entrance to that. And with OneGiri 1.0, that would be the retail customers. And but obviously there are some fraud scenarios where aggregators and VAS providers would be a weak link. I mean, nobody's safe. This is the thing. Like if we would have a webinar devoted entirely to fraud scenarios, then we would be finding scenarios that have the entrance with aggregators, with VEST providers, with enterprises, with terminator operator, with originating operator, even originating user sometimes. So we would be finding difference now. It's just that we're not covering this time in this webinar. And just make sure if you would like to see more on fraud scenarios in the next webinar, just let us know in the Slido. Vote it up, and we probably, if we would have enough vote, enough interest to that particular question, we would have a separate webinar on that. Okay, what's a typical profile of those responsible for these frauds? What are some of their objectives? A typical profile would be people that benefit from that. Well, people and sadly companies that are benefiting from that. If they can provide you with the service that you're not intended to obtain, if they can gain illegal access to your PBX, if they can maintain a massive robocall, a massive one-geary or a massive one-geary 2.0 campaign, and essentially being paid for that traffic, the chances are that somewhere in the supply chain there's a party that is originating them. So you have to look for those that benefit. Obviously, it wouldn't be an immediate party that is providing you the service, because that would be too, that's usually not the case. Usually someone in the supply chain is making these things happen. Okay, so we are going from Slido questions. We have been through that. And we can actually go to fraud management system overview. So since we don't have a better option of actually demonstrating what a good fraud management system would be, I mean, we're only using our system. So we would be demonstrating the features of a good fraud management system on our very own example. We have developed our own fraud management system for in-house use, and we're making it better day by day. We're providing it to our partners, like we devote the actual kind of portion of our platform for access for our voice partners, both operators and enterprise clients, and they're having access to the portion of the platform that is monitoring their traffic, that is devoted to their traffic and taking care of the fraud scenarios that are turning up there. So this would be the live demonstration of our very own fraud management system. Okay, the first things first, the dashboard. Dashboard is basically our window for outlook as to what's going on in the system. This is where your managers would be looking at as for active blockages, the reaction of the system. They would be looking at the statistics for the rejected calls. They would be looking for the last events that were triggered by the fraud management system. So they see what is going on there in traffic. They see what is going on with fraud attacks and what part of the system we're responsible of actually discovering them. What part of and what part of, like, what are the top destinations and top A numbers and B numbers for that. So they would have an insight as to what's going on in the traffic, or they have a surge in rejected calls. That would mean that they have a lot of attacks, or they have a decline, which means that fraudsters looking elsewhere. This would be the overview, and we highly recommend to spend some time in the dashboard just learning what's going on in the traffic. As for the protection methods that are being used by our system, the first thing would be, one more thing is that we highly recommend to have the unblock button on the dashboard. Your enterprise clients, or you yourself as an enterprise, might have a better idea as for who to provide service no matter what, and who to deny service. So it might happen that, even though we have been correct to deduce that, look, that there's a fraud case going on,
Still, you would like to provide the service to this particular enterprise, or you would like to call these particular numbers, because denial of service would be a way worse case than even a fraud attack. So you have that option here. You push that unblock button, and right away it's this blocking is gone. And this call would be done by the operator client or the enterprise client. Okay, so let's go to the features of a good fraud management system by going to the first method that we use. That would be proactive monitoring. The proactive monitoring is applying a vast database of high-risk numbers and high-risk ranges against the traffic that is going through the system. So we are a member of several anti-fraud associations. We monitor, obviously we monitor the community information as for new fraud scenarios and the numbers that were being used in those scenarios. We monitor all the data that could be going through our traffic. So, excuse me. And we're using the knowledge of the numbers and the ranges that were being used in those fraud scenarios to be to be checked against your traffic. So even though it's a massive tool that requires some work being done, still you would like to maintain a very simple user interface, and this is the case with us. We understand that even though the tool is very important and sophisticated, we shouldn't have too much buttons to push here. We should have that easy to use so that people wouldn't have any problem mastering it. So we have 2 severities here, and we highly recommend just have several severity levels or several categories to which you assign different kind of reactions depending on the parameter, on different parameters. And we make sure that when you have a high severity level attack, you might have no reaction for some reason. I mean, this is your call. Rejected calls or eject calls, and blocking A numbers for 12 hours or for 6 hours, or it's entirely up to you. We also have the different kinds of reports. We can have the basic report or detailed report on that occurrence, on that fraud case. And we also recommend just mastering what is detailed report. We recommend having those different kinds of reports for different severity cases. And obviously have an on and off tool just to be there if there would be some urgent action and you would like to turn that thing off. You can do that in a matter of seconds. And after you introduce all these changes, just make sure that you save your judgment and you confirm that the reaction is a bit different. The same thing goes with medium and reject calls. I mean, as you can see, it's a very simple window to work in, even though it's a very, very useful tool. I mean, if we go to dashboard, you could see that this particular thing was blocked due to proactive method. It's a very effective tool. Okay, behavior analysis. Behavior analysis would be the second thing that we would like to talk about. And if I'm being too quick, just let me know if I'm just talking too much. Behavior analysis is where we apply our machine learning. We talked about machine learning earlier. We described how essential it is to have that tool handy. And this tool is applied to be disguised to discover the well-disguised attacks, the new attacks, the unusual forms of attacks, something that you haven't yet discovered before. So this is the kind of tool that would be discovering fraud on an early stage. Because sometimes after fraudsters get into the routing for some international calls, they would be using those small calls just to test the waters and just to see if the fraud management system is working. That wouldn't be too significant, that there wouldn't be much of a loss, if any, but they would be testing the waters. And this is where your behavior analysis is shining. This is where your behavior analysis would discover those patterns that are typical for those early stages of a fraud attack.
And that would signal, that would block these attempts, they would make sure that the full-scale attack will not even be launched, because the fraudsters realize, look, the preparation stage isn't going too well, so why don't we just go look for an easier target elsewhere. And this is a very, very effective tool. In our system, we analyze over 100 parameters that are going along with the traffic, and it's been saving a ton of money for all of our clients and partners. I mean, we have cases where one partner would have 30,000 calls blocked per day because of behavior analysis and what it discovers, and after we check that behavior analysis was right in their judgment, that would be 30,000 fraudulent calls blocked and not damaging to the operator and enterprise client. So it's a very, very effective tool. It cannot be underestimated, and you cannot underestimate the work that is going to make such a tool work as it does in the best decisions out there. Again, with all that said, with all the complexity behind the curtain, you have a very, very simple user interface similar to proactive monitoring. You see several severity attacks, and you see different reactions. You break calls and block correspondent numbers, or you have no reaction, but you have a detailed report as to what's going on, and pretty much the reaction on yours, the sequence on your side is pretty much the same. So it's a massive tool. It's a great tool, but it's very simple to use. Okay. The custom rules. The custom rules would correspond the part of our presentation when we talk about the customization of platform to reflect the vision of a particular enterprise or a particular operator. Obviously, they know their traffic way better than any other partner. They have discovered the patterns that are typical for the good traffic. They have the patterns for the fraudulent traffic that is sadly typical in their network. So what we do is we provide a tool where they can set up a threshold-based rule to maintain and to be alert in the system whenever something out of normal, out of fraudulent world would emerge. So you have the threshold that could be set in here, and this threshold could be based on several parameters: on total charge, on duration, call attempts, on total calls, simultaneous calls, ACD, which stands for average call duration, ASR, which is average success rate, or like how many call attempts to actual calls ratio. And you set up the parameter, the amount that would constitute this threshold, and you set up the time frame throughout which you reach the threshold. So if you have $100 charge from one single A number to a particular country, and you have $100 within 3 hours, then you have yourself a medium severity attack, and you define the break calls and block, for example, for 3 hours, so that your team would have 3 hours to investigate that, to make sure that the judgment is correct, and to apply their own countermeasures to make sure. And you would like to have the detailed report probably for, let's assign it a high severity attack. I'm just showing how easy it is to use this tool. Obviously, the judgment would be made on your side, and it's entirely your thing to make the judgment on the custom rules that should be implied. The amount of rules is not limited. We have over 43 maybe during this week operators that are using our fraud management system, and some of them, they have dozens of rules, some of them have hundreds of rules, and we have a few clients that have thousands of rules introduced, like 1,000 of rules introduced into this section to reflect their vision on every destination, on every country. They introduce a particular control on a specified A range. They would like to keep an eye on a specified A range, like that could be a VIP client, or the range that they are not really sure about, but they would like to investigate and be notified if there is a spike of activity in there. So that would be the tool to be introducing multiple rules that would let you know what's going on and to get your reaction to be automatic and very fast. Okay, let's go to the enterprise protection. We briefly touched it in our OneGiri section when we describe a particular fraud scenario where that would be a legit service on the surface, but underneath that would be a full-scale fraudulent attacks. And we know that operators are often under attack because they lack the expertise and they're as knowledgeable as operators and carriers and the industry experts. They don't have the expertise, but they would also like to be protected. So that's the second part of the equation. They would like to have something protecting them. But the third one, the third kind of leg of this equation would be that they hate being denied service without proper explanation. I mean, especially with OneGiri 2.0, you have a marketing work of marketing department, you have work of sales department, you have a lot of work in call centers, you have just a lot of budget and a lot of effort being put into those. And then when you think that you're getting the fruits of your labor, that you would like to reach out to an actual sales lead, that you would like to reach to international customers that has beautiful questions about your products or service, that would like to know more and would like to perhaps be in your client, and then they encounter that, look, you cannot call these numbers because of some position that your solution provider is having. So, but again, if there's no denial of service, you would still like to be protected. So what happens is the enterprises are willing to chase a good sales lead, and they hate being denied service. So the wise thing to do was to create a warning tool, an opportunity to those enterprises not to fall into a trap. And that would be some kind of voice message that would be playing when they try to dial a particular fraudulent number. Like, for example, OneGiri 2.0, you have a callback form and your call center is dialing that number, which turns out to be a PRS number or a hijacked international route. And what happens is your representative would first hear a voice message that says the number you're trying to call is risky. Please press 1 if you would like to proceed. So we're warning them that something is going on. You should be extra careful. And please, we advise not to proceed with this call. But if it's your decision, if you would like to still to chase this lead, then go ahead. You can do that by pressing 1. And that solves a lot of problems. I mean, we educate clients about what's going on. We educate them that, look, there's fraud and there are some limits for the things that you could be doing with your international voice calls. We're making sure that the operators has this image, has a good relation with the businesses by showing them that this operator cares about their clients, they're protecting them, and they're using the tools that will not deny the service, but will also they are protecting people and companies against fraudulent losses. So if we have, for example, the operators that would like to add a certain business into list of the ranges that are being protected by the service, you just put it here. You put the ABCTG or whatever name that you would like to assign to your client, and they would be uploading the list of the numbers that would be protecting in the table format with the CSV file. You choose the language here. Well, right now the language of this warning message is English, but we can do that in any language imaginable. And that's about it. Like, you choose the CSV, you upload it, and you have yourself a new group of numbers that are being protected. And those numbers, if they would be the A numbers, the originating numbers, that would be trying to call the fraudulent ranges, that would be when this voice message would be playing. So regarding automated voice services, and voice services that we described just now, it's being targeted at the first category of enterprises that we described in 1 GUI 2.0. Those would be the call centers with the actual representatives online. The automated voice services would be targeted at the second. We can come back just a little bit. Those would be the enterprises with 1 GUI 2.0 that are delivering voice messages. When we encountered these fraud scenarios, I mean, we thought that, well, perhaps this is only affecting the enterprises with call centers. But then we realized that that some of the numbers that are being used as origination numbers would be the numbers of delivery of one-time passwords. And those one-time passwords would be delivered by a very, very well-known companies. I mean, if you think about a tech giant from North America, the first name that would pop up would probably be your right guess, because we saw traffic that was sadly delivered by this very, very large company. And they fell into a trap of 1 GUI 2.0. And the same thing happened to a top 10 Chinese tech giant that would have those one-time passwords being delivered to the expensive international routes just automatically. So this is a fraud case when nobody is safe, and there is no way to play an IVR message. So we highly advise to use automated voice services to be protected from fraudsters taking advantage of your one-time password delivery. So in this case, there wouldn't be any call. The passwords wouldn't be delivered. There would be no duration of fraudulent of a call to a fraudulent number. So you wouldn't sustain any losses. Okay, the next part would be the blacklist. The blacklist is where the operators and enterprise clients, again, they get to customize the platform and its responses when they input the numbers that should be denied service no matter what. Even if the pattern of traffic has the features of a good normal traffic, but you know that these numbers should be denied service, and they could be A ranges or B ranges. They could be originating numbers would be denied service, and the B range numbers, the destination numbers, would be denied service. You get the numbers that you hate to see in your network and your traffic, and you put them there. Obviously, this section is for the client to fill. When we provide this section, the blacklist, to our clients, it's completely blank. And we just let them fill it up depending on their vision, because the blacklist of one company will not be identical to another company's blacklist. So it's entirely for the client to customize custom rules, and entirely for client company to customize blacklist. The same thing with the whitelist. We all have our list of VIP clients that shouldn't be denied service no matter what, that should have connectivity and best quality possible no matter what kind of scenarios might sadly take place, because denying them service would create a much larger conflict than just being sadly targeted with fraud. So the client, the enterprise client, or maybe the operator that is using the system, would be filling up this section with the numbers that wouldn't be denied service no matter what. That's their position. It's their risk to take, and we respect that. So we have the tool to have their vision of those untouchables. Whitelist is usually the second priority rule. So if the number is both in, well, for some reason it's both in blacklist and whitelist, then it would be denied service because it's a second priority rule. But again, that's individual. We can set it up vice versa. We can have the blacklist to be a second priority rule, and we have the whitelist to be a first priority rule. It's all manageable, and we highly advise to those that are looking for the system to have that feature. Just like the features that we list before, we advise to have that blacklist and whitelist in the fraud management system that you're accepting. So about the reporting, as much as it's vital to have a nice interface, as much as it's vital to have the functionality of the system, you have to make sure that the alerts that are being spotted and taken care of by your system are being properly reported. You cannot have the system just running around on its own with no information being delivered to people responsible. So what we have is, and again, this is a feature that we highly advise to have in your fraud management system. You have the alerting and reporting policy. You have the list of people that would be using your platform. Those would be the operational specialist. Those would be the manager level specialist, the traffic manager specialist, and those would be the CXO level, your directors, your chief officers that are responsible for example, for revenue assurance or for fraud management if you have a separate CXO for that. So you maintain different reporting policies for different positions. For example, if you are at the operational level, you probably would like to have all the features enabled. You would like the whole team to, the whole operational team to have the FMS alerts. So whenever something happened, they're notified by Slack or email right away. If you are on a manager level, but you would like not to be bothered with each and every alert, each and every case, no matter how small it is, you would like to have FMS alerts off, but you would like to have hourly FMS reports. You would like to have those daily reports just let you know what's going on. If there's a spike in the system reaction, or there isn't, or there's a decline, you would like to know what's going on. Those on the upper level would like to have not to be bothered with each and every FMS alerts or hourly, but still, like if you're a director or a department head would like to keep an eye onto what's going on with the system and how clean the traffic is, and are you being under attack daily or weekly or monthly, you could have that feature enabled. And obviously, if you're a CXO, you probably would like to, and if you have just would like to have a general overview as to what's going on within the system, you might have a daily FMS reports. As for the last ticker, the notifications about rule changes. The notifications about the rule changes just let everyone know that some changes in the custom rules are being introduced. There are some changes in proactive monitoring reaction or behavior analysis reaction. There are some changes introduced in blacklist and whitelist. There is some input in the system, and especially at early days of adoption of a fraud management system, we highly advise you to have notifications about the rule changes on, just to let you know what's going on, how the system is reacting, and just being curious as to what's being introduced into the system, what kind of custom rules or reactions are being introduced in there. So. The SIP settings is purely technical. This would let you know if SIP 603 is our by default disconnect code. That means that the disconnected call or rejected calls will not be redirected. So you trust the system reaction 100%. You know, if the call is declined by this particular system, it's not the call that you would like to have. There's also an option of having 503 SIP code. That would say that the code is allowed to be redirected, like this particular system didn't like this particular traffic, but perhaps like you don't fully trust the judgment of the system, so there are options in there. And that's about it, about the dashboard and just representing our system. We obviously tried our best to tell you everything there is about our system. And on that example, we show what we think the good fraud management solution should look like, what things to watch out for, what to look for in the system, what kind of features should be introduced, and it should be obviously just like our system. We highly advise to have a real-time analysis in action. We highly advise machine learning to have in your system that you use. So that's it about our system. And let's switch to the slides. I believe we... Okay. How the numbers get into the blacklist? Just a quick question that we see. It's fairly simple. Like you go to the blacklist, and if you would like to add one number, that would be the field here, and you put that 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 here, and the number that you would like to be A range or B range. I mean, nobody's limiting you to add the same number into A range or B range. And you add it like this. So you can see that it's immediately is introduced here. There's also, you can have a smaller range. I mean, a larger range here, and you introduce it like this, so all the numbers that fit this code would be in there as well. Or you might have an export of CSV. If you have if you would like to introduce, and this is how you filter out, this is how you basically browse your list. But if you would like to export a CSV, and to have, there you go, excuse me, got a bit lost here. So when you would like to upload a serious amount of fraudulent numbers, like in the table, you put that table into a CSV format, and you choose a CSV format in here, and you basically, you're looking for the number that, you're looking for a table that would feature all the numbers that are necessary to be included in the blacklist. So you have, basically you have several ways. You have any number or ranges in total, or you can upload a serious list of numbers to be introduced in a format of the table. Okay. So with that covered, let's go back to the market trends. Just going back to the market trends and how our solution, or the solution that you would like to be looking for, would be introduced. Okay. So the ongoing trends, sadly, fraudsters are improving, and they get better. They are getting better in tech. They invent different formats. They invent different scenarios. They are faster. They are able to launch a lot more attacks in the period of time, and they get better. So as we saw with 1GIRI 2.0 example, even tech giants, even those companies that are on the edge of the technology, the one that are creating trends and moving the technology forward, they would sometimes be not safe from particular fraud attacks. So that's the reality, and you have to get better. You have to get better at protecting yourself against these cases. The fraud is a very significant issue. It requires more resources, sadly, even in the sad world that we are in. You have to get better, and you have to elevate yourself above the fraudsters that are out there. We have major cuts in budget, but still, that's the second one. The cuts in budget are typical, especially due to pandemic that we all are facing. And also, the companies view the anti-fraud management as fixed expenses. And I have a financial background. I could tell you, and I could, honestly say that fixed expenses are
likely to be cut, even a small percentage, but there must be a slight decrease in those over time. Nobody likes to increase their fixed expenses. They would like to increase their variables with operational expenses, because that would mean that they have more business. But with fixed expenses like fraud management system, the trend is going down in just spending on the fraud management system. So you would like to be looking for a system that doesn't cost much and doesn't involve a lot of resources to get integrated. And the third one would be the real-time protection machine learning, as we demonstrated. The real-time protection is very important to have, and it's vital to introduce new technology like machine learning, like artificial intelligence, to be sure that you're being protected from the newest fraud scenarios, even from the most sophisticated fraudsters out there. And you would like to have the best defense that is out there, just because of the figures that we saw earlier. I mean, this is just enormous figures, and you wouldn't like to be on the wrong side of it. Okay, I guess it's time for the second set of questions, if we have any. Yeah, I believe we're doing fine. And yeah, I guess we don't have any new questions. Just keep the conversation going. And within the Slido, we have a section of, I believe it's called Request for a Personal FMS session. If you would like to know more, if you are particularly interested to know more about the fraud protection, if you would like to know more about our system that we employ, just let us know through Slido. There is a tool for that in there. Yeah, so this is how you reach out to us. Keep the conversation going if you have additional questions. And also, if you would like to know more about the other fraud scenarios, I mean, we only had time to cover 4 of them, but there's a vast majority of other fraud cases. There are dozens of them. And if you would like to have a webinar that would cover these fraud scenarios, then let us know through Slido, or reach out to us through the emails that we usually communicate through. And let us know if you would like to have an additional webinar about some different features or different fraud scenarios. And I believe we're good. So thanks everyone for attending. It's been a pleasure talking about what we do. It's been a pleasure just letting you know and educating the general public and telecom community about the new things about fraud management and the fraud scenarios. If you would like to know more, reach out to me at iskutsenia@lanktele.com, or drop a line somewhere along fms@lanktele.com if you have particular questions about the fraud management system of ours. And just, yeah, we'll see how it goes with the reaction. We'll see how it goes with the feedback, and perhaps we'll see you next time. And one more feature is, one more thing that we'd like to add. We saw a lot of responses that we cannot, from North American and Latin American attendees, that they couldn't attend this webinar because of the time difference. So we might have a like webinar sometime in future, just in different time zones, slightly later, so that they can attend and they could learn. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.